Amos everyone, just a short video about the different experiences of striking and the feedback we get from these various different experiences and how they affect our body and our technique and how we really need to do all of them in order to be a complete karateka. So obviously many of our techniques in Kihon and Kata are done in the air. So punching in Gyakuzugi, as we'd so often do, we have to calibrate the extension, the full extension of the arm, the full involvement of our hip, the stance, the floor, the everything else. There's a lot going on, but obviously we're not actually hitting anything. So we are, however, developing this sort of proprioception of understanding exactly the limits of our body's extension, when to focus the technique, when to draw everything in alignment so we don't injure ourselves and we don't start throwing our punches away wildly. And also there's a certain meditative quality because we can't get involved in hitting the target because it's not there. So we can't overreach ever because then our imagination must be a little bit off because we're reaching for something that doesn't exist. So we have to pretend that the circumstances are perfect, full hip rotation, full body involvement, but we're stopping it with ourselves and there's nothing there to influence that stop except ourselves. So the next very important experience is obviously hitting something. And Nakayama Sensei famously said that the Makiwara is the soul of karate. Its practice must not be missed for a single day. And I have to say I agree. Not being able to hit the Makiwara does result in a loss of infinite calibration that the body has to make in order to hit something very hard, and my Makiwara happens to be pretty stiff. So maybe a little too stiff for some people, but I prefer that rather than too soft because you don't want to be springing around and bouncing around too much with a very bendy Makiwara because of course you're going to start wanting to push it further because you're not getting the feedback, the immediacy of the feedback. So it's extremely important because of that calibration aspect. And when you hit something as narrow as this, as hard as this, and as hard as we perhaps aspire to hit it, then your timing has to be perfect. And very often you'll have timing that's imperfect. In other words, this arm's not pulling, so therefore the body's not really governing the technique. And so the hand comes out and you get a sort of dullness to it like this. Or you'll get someone locking it just like you're doing Kihon, so sort of locking on there, and so you've got a deceleration before the impact. Very important to get this hip going. So the moment the hip stops, you should be hitting the Makiwara. What we don't want to do is turn the hip and flick, which of course I've exaggerated there. I mean, for obvious reasons, the exaggeration highlights exactly what's going on. We have to accelerate the armpit. I'll just show you on the other leg. We have to accelerate the armpit, so that is like a multiplier. If we're moving the hip, let's say probably less than a foot, let's say 10 inches or so, 9, 10, 11 inches, kind of depends how big your hip can rotate. But anyway, less than a foot probably, but the arm is going to go at least 3 times that distance. So you've got a multiplier of 3 there, which means if you're late, of course it'll flick quite quickly, very quickly in fact, but it's going to be not having the body power, the source, the greater power behind it. So when we're hitting the Makiwara, always start off fully shomen with your hips, fully complete in your stance, and that's where you find exactly where your back leg should be, how it's driven into the ground, where your stance is, how your front foot is breaking, and then from here we draw back to a hit. So as we hit, again, we can't start flicking that hand. If you involve your shoulders, you can skid off from side to side, which will take the skin off, and maybe even worse, maybe sort of damage your wrist, etc., etc. So we start from here, flex the back leg, so you've got really movement from the ground, but also your consciousness is from the ground. What you don't want is sort of think it through and try and control it by really staring at it and really trying to be almost intellectual about it. You've got to be pretty visceral. So it's a bit of a brutish movement, but in a good way, because you've got the intuitive quality here. So when you're hitting it, you are just getting the mind observing, almost detached. Now when I'm hitting here, obviously I want to hit it pretty hard. I'm hitting it fairly hard now, but I want to feel the involvement of my glutes and also the stretch of my quads right up to my hip flexors. So if I can, sort of using this bone, hitting with that bone. And what you find over time, and I probably hit the Makiwara, I'm guessing 50 times a day on each hand, on average. Sometimes I only get 20, sometimes I'm doing a Makiwara session that will go on longer. But what happens is, when you focus on this and you focus on your glutes and you focus also on properly pulling back the opposite hand, so you're getting full torso involvement. You know, we always spoke about pairing the forces of the arms. Well, you know, yes and no, but we can't take that in too simplistic a way. What we're really doing is, for example, my right arm, the shoulder blade is traversing my back, sending out the other shoulder blade. So, you know, it's not a question of this hand and this hand are moving and pairing the forces. We're demonstrating the use of our entire torso, which is reflected in the movement of this arm. So let's do a few more, but as I say, if you're using all those things and involving yourself in that way, you are getting quite intuitive. And when you're intuitive, then you can start trusting the process, trusting the body, and not thinking, I need to use my intellect. Just thinking about my backside. Sometimes I'll overdo the posture because I have a slight habit to do this, like a lot of people. So I just want to get that backside. I'm pumping my leg a little more now. Also bringing this arm back, we've got to be careful not to bring it across the body. Then we start getting the shoulders. When the shoulders take over and don't align with the hip, but sort of try and do more themselves, that's when you get the spin off. And I've had people of quite a high grade come into the dojo and, oh, you have a Makiwara, they want to hit it. The first hit, guess what? It bounces off because they're not used to the solidity and they haven't calibrated on a deep level their focus of that specific very small point. So as we're hitting it, we want to go try and get the knuckles in the same two places. These two knuckles, of course. Okay, let's show it from another angle. From this angle, you'll see there's a little bit of bounce because this is extremely springy and, like I say, perhaps a little bit too hard. But there is a fair bit of movement there if we push it pretty hard. So, you know, we've got a couple of inches there. That's about all we're going for, which is good because we don't want to punch through the Makiwara. And we'll come to that in a minute. So from here, focusing on those two knuckle imprints, accelerating through the armpit, attaching it to our backside, which is squeezing underneath. So if we had electrodes attached to our backside, my right glutes, they would fire fully on the moment of impact. I want to feel like I'm using it, which lowers my consciousness, makes me drive more from the center, and brings a better technique into the equation. One thing we've also got to be aware of the Makiwara is not to snap the punch back. What we're going to use this for is a tool to get terrific feedback on impact with the Kihon that we're doing as standard practice, you know, up and down the dojo, you know, doing dozens or hundreds of oizukis or gyakuzukis, etc., etc. So we want to have that experience of the Kihon fed by the experience of the Makiwara. So they both sort of feed each other. Kihon, of course, we're going for perfect form and everything else. Makiwara is like the only time we can really hit something and concentrate on perfect form. In other words, the feet perfect, the hip perfect, the posture, the finish, the entire hikite hand being completely stopped here. You know, when we're doing kumite, we're never going to stop it. We're always going to be moving around. There's always going to be some compromise because the opponent is constantly moving. Now, why we don't leave it there in kumite is pretty obvious. The opponent might move, they might block. You have to adapt spontaneously to that moment. Now, it also makes it easier to adapt. With the Makiwara, we don't want to have that ease of adaptation. We want to be fixed. We want the Makiwara to be fixed. So if we start laying into it in this way, you know, I'm going to hit it as not much harder than this because it'll go too hard. Even that, you know, you can see the movement of the Makiwara is probably at least as much as it is with the hard focused gyakuzugi I do. And that's not to say the focused gyakuzugi is not as good. It's just what we use all the time in Kihon. So we have to have the hitting experience to complement that. When we are hitting someone, we're going to be on the move. We need more control. We need sometimes to hit really hard. We need to recover. We need to adapt to the moment. So that can only happen if this is completely dominant. When we're in a fixed position, winding up and shooting it out, you know, we've got these parameters. When we're moving around, the parameters are looser and looser and looser. Therefore, we have to have something that we can really rely on, and that's the center. So moving from the center not only makes it more accurate, makes the calibration become more intuitive from down here, it also means that the arm is consequently really free. Well, free, I suppose that's the wrong phrase. It's really malleable by the dominance of the center. So the greater power, the center, the greater intuitive control is the center. The arm is just a tool that we're using. So we keep it really flexible. And when it's flexible, of course, it doesn't stop. When I'm stopping, I'm focusing stuff. So you're experiencing the focus with the hit. When we're snapping it back, we're not focusing it and locking it, so therefore it's in motion. So it never decelerates, it never stops, it never slows down. It actually gets faster on the moment of impact. And so therefore the moment of impact is the fastest part of the technique, which obviously speaks for itself as being much more effective. So, you know, let's not start doing this. And sometimes you'll get someone come into the dojo and I'll have to say, you know, can you not do that? Because you might break the Makiwara. That's not because the Makiwara is weak, it's because this is the wrong tool to use for a very powerful, boom, snapping it back type punch. So the third experience of hitting would be the bag. And this one's just one of these water-filled bases. And it's reasonably movable, but it's got a solidity to it, which I find is a very good balance. Now, what you have with the bag, of course, is a much larger target, a bit more softness on the outside, and also you just lay into it. So we don't want to hit the bag in the same way as we hit the Makiwara, because we don't get the same feedback. We don't get the hardness that is conducive to developing those real sort of micro connections in the body, and the timing and the focus onto a specific target at a specific moment. We really just want to lay into this now. So we're not going to stop the arm. We're going to have it snapping back, unlike the Makiwara. And when we have that, we have much more of a kumite feeling. So we really want to lay into this and hit it here. What I don't want to do is hit it and push, because I can push, and yeah, I can probably push it over pretty easily, but you know, we've got the windows and everything else. So my goal is not to push it over. I want to hit it as I'd hit a person. And if we went so far as to push and knock this thing over, we'd probably just push our opponent back as well. It wouldn't have that impact, that dynamic, forceful impact that penetrates. You know, how deep do you want to penetrate into the body? The ribs, couple of inches, the stomach, 3 or 4 inches. You know, you're not going to go much further than that. So when we're pushing the heavy bag over, we end up pushing it a foot or a foot and a half. It's too much. So here, we want to get timing as well. So my front foot is going to float, and I want to keep my front foot moving as we make contact. Moving as we make contact. And this, of course, has an element of zanshin to it. The hikte means I'm keeping my arm as light and as subordinate to the center as possible, and snapping it back as you would do in kumite. You leave something there, then something else happens and you haven't recovered. So this arm, boom, it snaps back, and we're on wrong kamae here. Floating foot, boom, and back here. So on this, obviously very similar things are happening with the Makiwara. Body rotation, and default, you're going to bring that arm back. Still going to bring the arm back. Still going to be here. Why? Because you want to develop that back body. When your hand is habitually here, kind of like kumite, you're going to end up poking with the hand, and it's going to be a decent amount of power, but it's not the same as going with your body. There's not that full body power that sort of builds the hierarchy of importance in the body. So I mentioned before, we have to have that foot moving. So try not to stop, which is very common because we get a bit upper body heavy, and lean. Stop and lean. Stop and lean. It's just bad form. Plus, if you get blocked, you'll almost tumble forward. And move from below. So backside under, just like when we were hitting the Makiwara. Float that foot and try and make contact while the foot's still moving, even before the foot lands. So not 1, 2, but pop that hand back. Feeling of hitting with glutes. Traverse the back by rotating your opposite side for a pure gyakuzuki. Principles remain the same when you're hitting the bag. Basically posture, timing of torso rotation, feet parallel at the finish, obviously reaching with that hip bone, but your arms are just more flexible. You allow your heel to come up at the back, and you can lengthen and lengthen and lengthen your stance without compromising your posture. For example, my heel's on the ground right now. This is not good. If I go longer, it's going to be even worse. Now, I've got the same length stance, but my heel's off the ground. So we need to keep that posture and know that in the hierarchy of things, posture trumps heel on the ground. And the heel will flex and come back, flex and come back. So don't be wedded to exact Kihon as Kihon is done. That's looking for perfection. I mean, obviously, heel on the ground is a harder punch because there's no softness anywhere. But we are driving forward and reaching with our center, not reaching with our hand. So we need to be able to adapt, and the center reaches and the limbs adapt to what the center perceives is right for that moment. The other things we have in terms of the experience of hitting is hitting a person. This is no good. I should have one of those bob things, which I don't really want in my dojo, but they're a great tool for getting right on the chin. So if I use this as the skin, we need to just touch the skin. Just touch the skin. So you want to be able to lightning fast and have perfect control. So it's nice to practice that on the bag, and indeed you can do that on the Makiwara as well. And you can practice degrees of, you know, for example, skin touch is here, and then, okay, that's, yeah, if I were hitting someone on the chin, that would definitely jolt the chin and probably be hard enough. So you don't have to hit someone maximally on the chin to get an effect. You just have to be hard, very fast, very accurate, have good timing, and hit somewhere bony. And then, you know, you can achieve the effect desired. So, you know, that obviously you're not going to use on a regular basis, but those are basically your 5 hitting experiences. The air, the Makiwara, the heavy bag, control on a person, and, you know, causing injury on a person, which, you know, is a sort of a little bit of a once in a while kind of thing. You know, that's not what you can practice on a daily basis, of course. Makiwara, every day. Kihon, obviously, Kihon and Kata, every day. A few times a week, do a good session on the bag. And the final one, maybe the 6th one, you could say is Tameshiwari, which is breaking, practicing breaking. And this is more psychological. If you can practice breaking and be confident in your technique, then you have overcome the barrier of fear, where fear and ego, where when you first do it and you've never broken anything before, you probably know that you can do it, but you're not sure. So you have a doubt. The next person broke the wood. Can you break the wood? So there's that sort of doubt, and that can really affect you quite badly in competition or in you know, a real situation where you've never actually hit someone hard. You don't really know how it feels, and you don't really know if you can deal with reality. So it's important to come as close to practicing that regularly as you can. And then, of course, when it happens, hopefully you'll already be on autopilot and it won't affect you badly. Anyway, main point of this video is the Makiwara, how to hit it in my opinion, and how useful it is and how important it is for your daily practice. I've had private students who didn't have the opportunity to hit the Makiwara for many, many years, and after a couple of months of hitting the Makiwara, their kumite has improved. Even though it doesn't appear to be the same technique as the Makiwara, the calibrations and the timing and the body linkages are, you know, you can't overstate the value you get from Makiwara practice. Also, everyone, see you in the next video. Thank you very much.